And here we are on a Monday night, Generation Movie, finishing up our Oscar Decade Cavalcade with me, J.W. Colwell, your host, my co-host, my partner in crime, who's also celebrating a birthday this week. Happy birthday, Rich Drees.
Good evening, JW. How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. You know, I did something you wouldn't necessarily associate with me. I went to Monster Jam on Saturday. We have little youngins in the house, and they like big, loud trucks. Actually, they don't like loud shit at all, but they like big things that break, like the toys in our house does. So we saw like axles get popped, we saw wheels get destroyed. It was it's at Camping World Stadium, which I think it's the worst stadium I've ever been to. I've been to a lot of stadiums in my life. It's not a good stadium. It doesn't have good food. Like all the stadiums have moved their amenities around to be like amazing. And Camping World Stadium, the moment we got there at 7:00, all the lines were like, "We're out of Gatorade." Every single one. They were like, "We're out." And I'm like, it's the show doesn't start till 7:30. Like how could you possibly be out at 7? But we have some other big announcements. We have the Grand Poobah's here tonight. So while we may not get the other Grand Poobah, somebody who thinks she's a Grand Poobah, right? We might not get our gal because she's been cast in a show. She's got business. She's busy right now. We might not get her. We have been called down on high by the Grand Poobah of the Indie Escape Network. I'm very excited.
We in trouble?
I don't know if we're in trouble. We could be in trouble. I mean, is it the kind of thing like The Godfather where they tell you, hey, show up, and then, Michael kills you with the gun, and like we just kind of keel over like that, like the cop who's really enjoying the pasta and whatnot in the shady Italian establishment. No, I just think he wants to check in and say hi to everybody because he's been kind of like to the side of things, running everything behind the scenes. But every once in a while, he comes out and sees a shadow. Joe Ridgely, ladies and gentlemen.
Wait a second. Sorry, guys. Here you go.
Yeah, that'll be the fucking day. Anyway.
Wait a minute. Natasha isn't here, and she scares me.
Why are you looking up like her? What is going on? She is taking over the show. Oh, he's poking Rich. Okay, so I'm welcoming you. I know we have a big thing on the network this week that I do want to talk about for a moment because I think it's super important when we have talented people on our network. And I haven't had the good fortune. I've talked to Mick, but I have not met Mick Strawn in person because we were supposed to meet him, and then somebody didn't do well with their liquor at the last event we were at. I can't imagine who that might have been.
Mick wasn't there.
Nick wasn't there. Okay, well, that's fine. Then
I was sober enough to know that. Nick Benson was there.
Yeah, I talked to Nick a lot, actually, that weekend. But we have a big event coming up on the network. I wanted to have you on just to make sure I didn't I wouldn't screw up the promo, but you got the Sticky Microphone this week is Thursday, March 7th at 10. You are, of course, producing the show with Wendy Zier, who's doing great, but Mick Strawn's going to be on, and actress and writer Sam Wren Vincent is going to be on.
Hey, you know who's co-hosting with Wendy?
Who is co-host? I know, I don't.
Oh, Jamie.
Oh, Jamie Hill will be back. Oh, that's great. You know what? Jamie is such an demure person, and Wendy is not demure. And I think when you get that dynamic together, it makes it for an amazing kind of really nice questions and then really awkward questions. And that's the kind of podcast I like.
I would. Okay.
She gets you awkward too. So I'm all for that kind of podcast where you're getting awkward.
Well, I mean, Jamie isn't exactly innocent, but we'll say she is.
I mean, she almost murdered her children. Big deal in the movie. Big deal.
Right?
Who cares?
Oh, and I'm sorry. One more thing.
By the way, Jamie Hill. Just Skinnamarink, not in real life.
Rich, happy belated birthday, brother. Sorry.
Man. I appreciate that. It was a great day yesterday. Heard from a lot of friends, which is always nice. And
did you get pastries? I heard you got pastries. Did you get pastries?
I got pastries from 2 different states.
Wow.
I got a nice cruller from Voodoo Donuts in Colorado delivered to me.
Oh, that's very nice.
Look at Joe's eyes.
Yeah, man. That's badass.
That's nice.
My very badass friend Heidi, stuntwoman Heidi.
Stuntwoman.
And Natasha was actually spending the weekend in New York with some friends, and she brought me back some Ispahan from Slattery, which is a great French bistro. It has 2 places in New York and Paris.
Just tell me what the pastry is so I can imagine it and not have it here tonight.
Kind of like a raspberry tart kind of a thing.
Motherfucker.
Right.
A raspberry tart, you bastard.
You know what happens when you tease the fat kids with food?
Yeah, it's terrible.
I'm
raspberry tart sounds delicious right about now. Anyway, so what else is going on with the network, Joe? Any news? Any things from Grand High? What have you been working on? How have you been enjoying your time?
It's been great, thank you. I've been spending it with my family as much as I can.
I know you work really hard, and also I know you have a little grandbaby that just popped out, and he's making his way. You've already got him wearing giant shit, which is just I don't know why you would do that to him.
Okay, first of all, that was my son, not me.
all Child Protective Services.
Well, but I can't say anything if I'm I'm trying to raise kids Raider fans. That's not. It's just not right. I
agree. It's not right to raise them Raiders fans. I 100% agree.
Okay. Okay, Joe.
We hit 600 episodes on YouTube, guys. We're over 600 episodes now.
Rich, it's good.
Or I'm sorry, videos. Not
Rich,
episodes.
we're not being murdered. We're not being killed. He's not killing us off. It's a good
Not yet.
The poobah has showed up early and often, and it's for praise, which is nice. It's like when Ralph and Norton on the Honeymooners went and they got they got praised by the Grand Poobah. It's nice.
Anyway, yes, especially thanks to you gentlemen over the past year and a quarter.
Yeah, give or take. We don't want to put any time constraints on how old we are.
but anyway, yes, thank you very much, gentlemen. You guys have been just amazing. We appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate the freedom we have. Let's get some comments before you go, because very rarely do we get to see you on the network anymore.
I forgot to say good evening, gentlemen. Sorry.
Yeah, good evening, friends. Happy early birthday, Rich. It's a late birthday, Ken. But thanks.
Yeah, Ken, you're
close.
But I appreciate it anyways.
Yeah.
Have
Cheetah Will View. Hello.
Hey, speaking of which, he just had Terry Gerald and John Dugan on the other night.
Oh, did he?
Great interview. They were
Jamie
talking
is
Harlow's
awesome.
Haunt.
Oh, what does he do? He does
has
like a movie show?
He has a podcast as well. I think, it's Have Cheetah Will View on YouTube. So go give that a look.
Yeah, well, it's we don't like pushing people outside of our network, but if they're super talented and they have our friends on, we like them. Like, that's what happens. Joe was hanging out with us last Friday, and thank you for that. Oh, I'm sorry. You were hanging out with Joe?
See, I was commenting last Friday. And, I mean, again, absolute great interview. Saw it on YouTube.
We appreciate him here. I hope he likes the show that he's tuning in for. We're going to be talking some dark subjects tonight, so but it's a great movie that deserves more praise. We had on Jamie Hill as well. Sorry. I will make sure I check it out, though. I try to check out everything that has Indie Escape Network ties, connections, connective tissue, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, it's been a good time for the network. We have some things we're growing. Rich and I, after tonight, take a nice 2-week vacation so we can enjoy the Oscars. Maybe we'll throw something up about how we feel about certain things as they're happening. Maybe we won't. And then also we'll probably throw up something where we're talking about like, oh, Oppenheimer won 10 awards, or oh, Oppenheimer didn't win as many awards as we thought it was, or oh, Emma Stone won and that was awkward.
Well, I know on my socials during the Oscars, I will probably be throwing out some commentary. Some commentary I'll probably be saving for my actual Oscar.
I throw out commentary like that was a good speech, or that was a terrible speech, or how could you have missed this particular person is what normally happens.
I had a great friend who was wonderful for every year. The second the in memoriam was over, for going, they missed this person, this person, this person, this person. And sadly, he passed away several years ago now. Yikes. Time is rolling on. But every year when the in memoriam starts, I just kind of sit there and think,
it's cringe.
Because he would be giving me some good info.
It's cringe as well. Joe, a couple things. Since you're here on our show tonight and you're in our pre-show, did you see Dune? Did you participate in Dune this weekend? No? Okay, Joe, you're definitely not on the cutting edge right now. As everybody knows, Dune grossed a lot of money this weekend, and is, while not saving movie theaters, certainly gave them a brief respite from death row. As we await Kong and we await Ghostbusters and we await some other things coming out in March.
So wait a minute, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because I IM'd you earlier.
Yes.
The new Ghostbusters comes out when?
Okay, so a couple things. When we were designing this schedule, first off, we're taking 2 weeks off, and then Joe ruined it, but now we'll go over it. That's fine, Joe. Well, we're going to talk about this later, but since you jumped us, that's fine.
Damn it, Joe.
Damn it, Joe. Joe's always ahead of the game. He's super ahead of the game. So a couple things. We were toying. Well, first off, Ghostbusters was supposed to open March 29th. That's in all fairness. Supposed to open March 29th. It is now Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is now opening March 22nd. So we had originally envisioned of doing this movie, something we've never done on our show, something called Ghostbusters, a little movie from 1984. Celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And we're going to do it on the show on the 25th when we're coming back. And it would have been perfect leading into the week of Frozen Empire, but now Frozen Empire is opening on the 22nd. So we will do the classic Ghostbusters movie on the 25th. And, of course, talk about Frozen Empire as well on the 25th. But that's what happened. That's where the rub came in, where we were going to do it the week of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire opening, but now it's going to be they moved it up. Is what happened.
I didn't know it got moved up. That's why I was just like, so Message you, I'm like confused. You say Ghostbusters for this date. Which show card am I making?
Yeah,
the
you're making us
the old one?
the original. Yeah, we're doing the original Ghostbusters because we've never done it. It's its 40th anniversary this year. And Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was opening, so we thought it'd be perfect as kind of a palate cleanser between the Oscar Decade Cavalcade and this little thing will be starting back up. James Bond. Will start on April 1st and run through the 29th. So it's kind of an exciting time for us. We will take a couple weeks off just to refresh, watch the Oscars, and maybe get one or two new shows up on the network.
Yeah, plug those real quick and then kick me out.
I can't plug them. I don't have a title or anything. I just know that I'm probably next week going to be working very hard to get a show up, not next week, but the following week, so that I can help them walk them through a premiere and but
if you know kids. Their names, give them a shout out so they know we're waiting for them.
Harry Kronetsky and his fiance Morgan are this great young couple that we've been working with, and also he's one of my improv students, so he's somebody I've worked with in the past. And basically, they're going to do a couple show about movies because they have varying tastes when it comes to movies. And the best example they can give is she really wanted him to watch Crossroads, which, by the way, in a weird turn of events, is now on Netflix.
But you got to say which Crossroads, though.
Well, yeah, the Crossroads with Britney Spears. Not obviously not the Ralph Macchio Crossroads. Come on, nobody wants to watch that Crossroads.
Wow. Shots fired.
There's a reason Ralph Macchio is still playing the Karate Kid 40 years after the fact. Also,
there's a reason I don't like him. 8-year-old me at Friendly's in Huntington, Long Island.
You met him? You met Ralph Macchio?
I wouldn't say met. I'd say 8-year-old me at Friendly's, Huntington, Long Island.
Were you slurping up ice cream and you bothered him? You bothered the Karate Kid? Yeah,
and he pretty much told me where to go.
Oh, come on. So we like him more. Come on. You were being obnoxious at Friendly's in 83. You deserved it. And the Karate Kid took care of your punk ass is what happened.
This was right before, actually, it was before Karate Kid came out. So we were still talking about Pony Boy. I mean, not him being Pony Boy, but we were talking about C. Thomas Howell.
Wait a second. Let's get into this story really quick before we get to the movie. Did you call him Pony Boy or something stupid like that?
No.
Are you sure?
Dude, I literally had a napkin in my hand and said, "May I please have your autograph?"
And what did he do? Say it. Want to hear it? No?
Never.
Was he
never?
He was mean to our Joe. I can't.
Yeah, basically take a hike.
Take a hike. Get out of here, kid. I'm about to be the Karate Kid. Take a pounding, buddy.
And then I'm going to make Crossroads.
But yeah, so we got some things coming up. But they're a really cute couple. She likes Crossroads with Britney Spears. He likes Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
That's not a bad movie to like.
It's a great movie to like. But if you're somebody who maybe watches Crossroads, Fritz Lang's Metropolis isn't necessarily in the same vein. So
I don't know what
it's
pertaining to. So
it's an opposites attract kind of couples movie podcast that we're gonna get everybody.
Well, no, but the movie I have no idea. It's a teeny bopper flick or something.
Yeah, it was Britney Spears. It was Britney. I believe it was Britney Spears' first movie, and it was just about her like and her friends going through teenage life
and selling a soundtrack that'll sell millions.
Yeah. Yes, did very well, and the movie, as I remember, it did do okay. It didn't do gangbuster. It didn't do like Taylor Swift Eras Tour or anything, but it did do pretty well for the time.
Better than the Van Winkle kid with Cool as Ice, or
definitely better than Cool. Definitely did better than Cool as Ice. But that's the kind of couple there. They're a fun couple. They like the Oscars. They're going to fit in well with our nerds on this network, and they're also They're both whip smart. They've both worked at Disney, so they have that amazing, incredible experience.
At the parks
the parks.
Okay.
They've both been fully trained at Disney etiquette, so I expect the podcast to run like some sort of like theme park where things are happening and everything's going every 3.5 minutes.
So it's going to be a rated. Is it going to be a rated G podcast?
I don't think so, because again, he's talking about Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which is all about. Yeah, maybe it's a PG-13 podcast
right.
with a little Neve Campbell nip, and we move on. But Joe, I love you to death. I love the network. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. Thank you for allowing us to put 600 episodes of something, whatever we kind of come up with on a weekly basis out there. And have a great night. Enjoy the rest of your brief vacation, because I was talking to you this weekend. Things might be picking up for you again. You might be coming back and stuff, and I long to see you again.
Yeah, that's why I needed the practice. Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing great. Keep it up, kiddo. You're tops. But thank you for joining us tonight. Again, we want to briefly talk about, before we start our spotlight view. Where did I put it? It's right there. The Sticky Microphone this Thursday, March 7th at 10 p.m. Director, production designer, FX artist Mick Strawn, and actress and writer Sam Renge Vincent, along with Wendy Zier, and of course the affable and beautiful and wonderful Jamie Hill. Not that Wendy Zier isn't beautiful and affable and whatever. She is also. They're both amazing. But we enjoy watching the Sticky Microphone around here. I do, at least. So thank you for joining us tonight. Stay out of trouble, you.
And guys, thank you again, and thank Natasha for me as well. I was hoping she would be here tonight, but I appreciate you all.
Everybody wants to schmooze with Natasha.
Where's my button to get out? How do I do that? So,
Right. And Joe is gone.
We'll see you in the comments, Joe. Thanks again.
See you in the comments, buddy. Let's see. A couple comments from Have Cheatable View. Theaters play more indie films. The audience will find them. That's true. And Crossroads was badass. Stevie Vai did all the music. I think he's talking. Are you talking? I think he's talking about the Machio Crossroads. I think he's talking about the Machio. I think he's talking about the Machio Crossroads.
Yeah, I don't see a Steve Vai, Britney Spears collab anytime soon.
You missed it? How could you miss it?
Boggles the mind.
Big story of the weekend, of course, is Dune 2 saved movie theaters. Maybe
Dune 2 doing good box office.
Yeah, Dune 2 is getting repeat business. People are going back to see it. It's doing very well. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. The box office of it tomorrow night on Loud and Nerdy. But I will also talk about, I don't know if you have Max. I don't know if you have it, but I will also be talking tomorrow night about the new show that premiered on Max last night called The Regime.
I've been meaning to catch up with that. I have to finish off Clone High Season 2, though, first. Because I do love me some Clone High.
I understand, but I'm going to tell you right now, this show is people are going to be angry, but it's funny as hell, and Winslet, again, sticks a claim in. I know everybody has, Jodie Foster on their deep list right now as the best actress of all time, but Winslet is quietly kind of like, she's definitely got her mitts in, like her hooks into these short miniseries that either become legendary, like Mare of Eastwick, which was amazing. But this one last night, I watched it last night and I've watched it twice. It's so awkward and so amazing and so just genuinely terrifying but funny, because it's about a regime in Europe, and she basically took over the country. One election, she just took over the entire country, and she hasn't let it go. And it's about an autocrat, and she's paranoid and crazy, and has handlers and handlers who have handlers, and handlers who have handlers who have handlers. And it's just this amazing pastiche. And and it's great. Also, Joe says, "Good evening, gentlemen. Sorry I'm late. You were here. Stop." Anyway, but the regime, we're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow night, along with we finally hit one of the great time at last is tomorrow night for our Twilight Zone Redux. So we get a little Burgess Meredith tomorrow night. The man who likes to read, and then, chef's kiss. Would you say it's one of the top 5 episodes, Time Enough at Last? It's in the running for top 10, right? I mean,
it's gotta be. I think that Eye of the Beholder, To Serve Man are probably the top 3 that come to the average.
I think Terror 20,000 Feet also comes.
Yeah.
I mean, there are 5 or 6. To Serve Man is, when we get To Serve Man, everything about To Serve Man is just amazing. But speaking of everything, and the gremlin in the Shatner one is just the greatest, scariest. I think the scariest thing about the costume design is that it's wet fur, and it looks fucking terrifying. And like when they redid it with the Spielberg version, they did it with Lithgow, and Lithgow was great, but the creature wasn't as scary to me. Like the creature was like a legitimately like alien, like, ripping the thing apart. But the thing about the gremlin in the original one is that it looks wet, it's furry, it's got like a weird smushed up face, and he looks wet, and it just makes me, and he's plump, and he's running around like this, and he's like just touching stuff, and he creeps me the fuck out every single let's say Death Head Revisited is the most powerful Twilight Zone episode. I don't know, we're gonna get there, Have Cheetah Wolvio. We're gonna get there because we're doing all of them
Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, which
Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is fantastic.
That's one of the very first scripts I ever read in junior high. The teleplay for Monsters Are Due on Maple Street was included in our advanced reading / English, whatever advanced placement English stuff course that I was in like 6th and 7th grade. And that was like the very first time I had ever actually read a script. And then
Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is pretty brilliant because the bookends on the script are absolutely perfect. The bookends on that script are absolutely perfect with just the aliens going, I don't know, we just turned the lights out for 3 hours. They freaked out. Like they were willing to kill each other. We can't kill them. Like, they're simple. Tell Rich argue with Dan Leatherface Yeager that episode isn't in the top 5. I guess Leatherface has a very specific feeling on this. But speaking of amazing and incredible and what we're here to talk about tonight, let's talk of this little movie we like to call Spotlight. Look at the first thing that jumps out on the poster. First off, the poster is not indicative in any way of how thrilling and invigorating this movie actually is. Also heartbreaking and amazingly well done. Mark Ruffalo, Micheal Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schrieber, John Slattery, Stanley Tucci, Billy Crudup, who isn't on the poster, Richard Jenkins in a supporting role where he's just a voice. The cast is impeccable, and let's talk about this really insightful 2015 Best Picture winner. As we start with production. And Rich, you every year, I know this is something you're into. Every year you tell me about the blacklist. There's a list of scripts.
Yes.
That is in Hollywood.
Yeah. Every year, Franklin Leonard, who was a low-level development exec about, 15 years ago now, kind of, sent an email out to friends at, various studios, talent agencies and stuff. He was getting ready to go on vacation. He said, hey, send me your recommendations of stuff to read. And he put together a list of a bunch of scripts that have been floating around town for that year that were not in active production. They may have been bought, they may not have been. And then he kind of just ranked them out, by how many votes they got. And it was like a big hit. It kind of quickly got outside of that little group of friends. and he just kept doing it every year. And like the first year he did it, this little script by an unknown screenwriter called Juno was the top vote getter. And then, a year and a half later, that movie's, been made. It's a big hit. And
wins a screenplay Oscar.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, that's the amazing thing. These are scripts that are that may have been there at a studio, but haven't been produced. And one of the most interesting things about this particular movie is that Spotlight was on that list. Spotlight was considered, it's based on a book, but 2013, I think it is, where it was on that list. And finally, they looked at it and said, "Hey, we're gonna take a crack at this." And I think that's where this all starts. Because without the script, you can't attract the talent you get. And without the talent you get, you can't get the movie you make, which is what happens here, right? Because this is such difficult material. Although I will say that the most interesting thing in production is they make the choice of, we're not putting the Catholic Church on trial here, because that's an easy, they're guilty, right? That's an easy story. What they decide to do with their script, and when they sit down with it, they come up with the idea that we're gonna McCarthy and co-writer Josh Singer basically say, we're not gonna go after the Catholic Church because that's shooting fish in a barrel. What we're going to look at, and in 2014, 2015, what the phenomenon that's starting to happen is American journalism is starting a little bit to die because of the internet, because we start losing local newspapers, because of all these things are starting to happen. And they take an interesting turn on the script and say, we're going to make it in how important American journalism is to hometowns and places where you grew up. And
and trust me, when we get into our own reactions to the movie later on, I'm really going to just go off. So you can sit back for 5 minutes and just let me babble.
Ooh, I like it when you babble.
With my own newspaper experience, having, freelanced entertainment features, sure. But, having spent time in a newsroom here in Wilkes-Barre, and again, rewatching this movie this evening.
Well, and especially
it brought back a lot of good feels, and it also made me mad about what's been going on.
Well, right here what's happened in Scranton. Scranton that paper has been utterly gutted with people who have been with that paper for years when it got bought up by a syndicate and a conglomerate. And so I think the story that's being told here is a real interesting part of the production, because you have to get around the issue that you're not going to put the Catholic Church on trial when it so deserves to be on trial for so many reasons. But that's not the movie you're making. That was a brilliant choice by the director, right? I mean, we have to give Tom McCarthy so much credit. And one of the things he passed on the film a couple times. He was like, this, I feel there's so much work that needs to go into this movie. But they complete the script in 2013. Of course, it's on the blacklist of unproduced screenplays. And then he wanted, one of the things Singer always talks about, again, is the power of journalism. How important is journalism in small towns or towns when we're losing all of our small town newspapers or losing all of these things because they can't afford to keep running, right? And I think that's a real interesting choice. Principal photography begins on January 24th after they accrue a roster of actors that is just, I mean, it's such rewatching the movie again, one of the things you look at and you go, they pretty much got everybody perfectly cast, right? I mean, you have Ruffalo as Renzedes, right? Michael Renzedes. You have Micheal Keaton as Robbie, his full name is Walter Robinson. Rachel McAdams as Sasha Pfeiffer. Brian D'Arcy James as Matt Carroll. And Liev Schrieber as Marty Baron. And John Slattery as Ben Bradley. I don't want to leave him out.
Ben, well, we should point out John Slattery's Ben Bradley Jr.
I'm sorry.
Ben Bradley Sr. was the Washington Post editor who helped Woodward and Bernstein with Watergate, and also was the editor at the paper when they broke the Pentagon Papers story. So, yeah.
Hence my little All the President's Men fun tonight.
Changing decisions about reporting is in that family's blood.
Yeah, that family, an incredible amount of things have come down in that family. They film in Boston, Massachusetts. Obviously, there's a lot of filming on location. They have a Fenway Park shoot that they do. They do film at the Boston Globe offices in Dorchester. They're filmed live at the Boston Public Library. They also film it on Hamilton, Ontario, which fills in for the early scenes with the police station and Father Gone. And they basically, they move the pieces around in the film. The film gets kind of a setter of where they're going to make it or how they're going to move a line or move a scene or fix some things around. That, in all honesty, we'll talk a little bit more as we talk about its lasting legacy. But it's a fairly historical, accurate portrait of everything that happened leading up to this Spotlight article premiering in the Boston Globe. And then it basically goes and it does what it's supposed to do. There's really nothing behind the scenes on, Rich, I love fights. I love caddy fights, Rich. There's nothing about this movie. There's nothing except we're all happy to be here. Although the occasional, you will hear stories. There have been a couple podcasts that have kind of highlighted Bryan Cranston was in line to be in this movie, and he turned it down for something else. He has since called it one of the worst decisions of my career, which is a testament to both the cast, the crew, and Tom McCarthy, the director.
Do we know for sure which role he turned down?
We don't know what role. I would have guessed. I'm going to guess Keaton.
That's where my thought was.
Maybe John Slattery. Maybe Marty Baron. The Cranston. I could see.
Well, but
I could see Cranston
in those roles than what we got. I mean,
I can't either. But I could easily see Cranston with a beard going to the Catholic Charities thing, or getting the Catechism book. I could see him as Marty Baron. I could also see him as Ben Bradley Jr. Any of the older male roles I could see him in, but Keaton is so great and so understated and so nonchalant, wonderful in this movie. He is as with age, Michael Keaton has turned into a fine wine that I can't even the sheer volume of how great he is with the projects he's undertaking that are all, obviously not Beetlejuice, but almost everything he undertakes is important these days. He's done some films about heroin and opioid, drugs online. He's done a lot of important stuff because he lost a nephew. And I think he's just one of our actors right now that not only morally has a lot going on at his core, but he also picks really great projects that highlight what he views as maybe our lapses in judgment in the world. And I think he's a gift. I don't blame the Flash on him. I think he's a gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But everybody else, Ruffalo and McAdams, both got supporting actor and supporting actress nods out of this movie, and they are tremendous. The only problem with that is, I view Ruffalo as kind of the lead, so it's weird to put him in supporting actor when he's in a good chunk of the movie. And somebody we haven't even talked about with casting, we haven't even talked about Stanley Tucci as Mitchell Garabedian, the lawyer who basically had so many cases. He didn't know what to do with himself.
With regards to the cat, fighting a very lonely fight, and was suspicious of people coming in to help because he'd been bitten by the terrible Catholic Church bug before. Mm-hmm. And I think, but it's a great cast. There's no production fights. There's nobody there's nothing bad about anything or anybody. And I think that's a testament when a movie, you can get a great movie and not have necessarily the chaos that we've seen in some of our other movies. That leads us to box office. How does it do? How does it project out? Well, it does okay. It ends up making a profit. It opening weekend, it has $295,000, which at the time in 2015 is one of the larger openings. It opens only on 5 theaters. It eventually gets to a max of 1,227, which again is in 2015, Rich. That's not a lot of theaters, right? No. For a movie this important, and a movie that would end up getting 6 Oscar nominations. So the idea, it does okay. It ends up grossing $45 million, and $45 million domestic and 46 internationally, for $91 million worldwide box office. Adjusted income is only $55 million. It is also one of the rare movies, because it came out in November and because it was released so quickly on home video, because again, it's 2015, we're kind of close to where we are in real life now. It doesn't get the Oscar bump it would have gotten had it not been available on home video. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird case where it played for a few months. It made $45 million with a very serious topic, but it never got what you and I used to call the Oscar bump, right? A movie that is out for a while and it wins Best Picture and it comes back roaring back into theaters because people want to see the Best Picture winner. And we're simply not in that phase anymore in 2015. So it is immediately released for home video viewing, and then it goes on and wins Best Picture. So instead of getting the bump it so richly deserved and seeing in theaters with people having conversations, coming out, talking about, it never gets that, Rich. And I think one of the reasons you and I chose this, aside from the very unique point that nobody has brought up about what movies we're choosing for this particular Oscar Decade Cavalcade, nobody has brought it up, Rich, about the thing that we know all these movies have in common. But aside from that, this is one of the rare movies that doesn't get an Oscar bump. It doesn't get that extra $40 million. This is one I definitely go back. I think for people who've seen it, and your cinephiles definitely know it. They know
how great it is.
They know how great this is. They know that these are great performances all around. It's an important topic, but it's still told in a very engaging way that's almost like a thriller at times.
It's got all the President's Men vibe to it, right? I mean, it's all the President's Men.
There's a Ben Bradley family member in here either.
Yeah.
But it's like a thriller at times when they're like racing deadlines, and then they're throwing roadblocks. There's hints that hey, you don't want to cross the Catholic Church there, buddy. Be a shame you had this.
The best one comes near the middle of the movie, where the Cardinal says, I'm not going to make a comment on it, and Keaton goes to a meeting at a bar with a friend from his childhood, and his friend's like, I realize this is your, a very racist kind of thing. I realize that this is your editor who is Jewish pushing this agenda. I'm not going to hold you to it because we know he's going to be gone in 2 or 3 years to somewhere else, just like he left New York, just like he left Miami. But where do you have to go? You have nowhere to go. This is where you live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shitty. It's shitty because Keaton's face, the blood drains out of him, and he just looks at him, and I love that line though. He's like, "This is how it gets done, right? This is how people look away, right?" Good people look away. This is how
racism throughout this movie, which hey, it's Boston, and it's
not casual. It's racist. It's just racism. It's not casual racism. It's
part of their nature. It's part of their nature. They don't, they're just like, we're Catholics, and your boss is a Jew, so it's like, oh well, of course.
It's weird.
Of course.
How about this from
us?
From Joe?
Is the thing.
Sorry to say, I hadn't heard of this movie before JW sent the list. Joe, I can't recommend this movie more. It's engaging, thrilling, incredibly well done. The actors are all at the top of their game. Like Rachel McAdams is amazing. She is one of the 3 or 4 people on the staff that are lapsed Catholics in this movie, and she has a whole sequence with Ruffalo where she forget about the box office. Let's get to the critique. You know what I mean? Because there's so many nice things to talk about. Box office doesn't really matter, but the story about the box office here, again, is this movie didn't get the bump that most Best Picture winners get, which to me is an astounding shame. All because they rushed it onto video.
But then again, we have the movie, so it doesn't matter. Ultimately,
I know, but I think it's one of those fair things where this movie should be higher in the ranks. Do you know what I mean? Like, this movie should be, it should be, again, our generation, All the President's Men, a movie we look at and go.
I think over time, that's what's great about the idea of home
movies.
Video. People will discover this movie. I mean, I have a copy of it right over there on my shelf. We're talking about it tonight, and I'm hopeful. Like, I hope Joe watches it. I hope Joe watches it and enjoys it. But however many people are watching this because they watch every week and are like, oh, they're talking about a movie I don't know, but it sounds great. They're going to check it out. Maybe some people. And this is one of them. This is one of them that I really hope they do. Like, if you don't want to watch The Godfather, that's on you. If you don't want to watch Unforgiven, whatever. But this movie you should check out. And what I would say is, what I enjoy most about this is the nuts and bolts, how the inner workings of how a newspaper functions. And the idea that, not that we're going after the Catholic Church, the idea that it's American journalism being torn asunder that is not there to save a small town. Our small town. I'm from Scranton. Scranton is on the list at the end of this movie as a place that had child abuse. So imagine in Cinemark in Moosic as those names start scrolling down. And you can hear people go, it's
but the list goes on for about 5 screens. Like, at the end of the movie, they do a list of all the cities that were detailed in the Catholic reports about child abuse, and it goes on for 5 full theater screens or full TV screens of names of cities in alphabetical order, so you can check if your city's there. The heart-wrenching thing that happens is you're from northeastern PA, like we are. Scranton's sitting on the list. It's clear as day on the list. You can't miss it. It's upper right corner on the third screen in. But I think Keaton gives a really great performance. He's playing the Southie, home person. Liev Schrieber is great as kind of the outsider. I love Ruffalo. This may be one of my favorite Ruffalo performances, because he's so engaged and he's so in the zeitgeist of the moment, watching things play out. And as things play out, the stacking, and I'm going to ask you if you feel this way. This movie didn't win Best Editing, but there's a sequence in the middle of this movie that is so profoundly done. There is a sequence in the movie where they're interviewing one gentleman who's clearly homosexual and was clearly taken advantage of, and he's being interviewed by Rachel McAdams. And at the same time, Ruffalo's character, is sitting in a room with a guy who is not homosexual, with a guy who's embarrassed and ashamed of everything that happened to him, with the Stanley Tucci lawyer character. And it cuts back and forth that they're both in the exact same boat. They're both two guys with clearly different things, and the two different reporters are approaching them in distinctly different ways. Like Rachel McAdams has coffee and a muffin. The guy overeats a little bit because he's nervous about meeting her, and you get to Ruffalo. The scene I remember distinctly is the guy going, "Do you really want to hear about all this shit? Like, do you want to hear about how I got groped while going for ice cream with a priest?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting too because these two characters are, very much kind of presented as different in that, one's a gay man, but he's kind of a little bit more open to talk about it. Straight guy feels a lot of shame. He hasn't processed it.
Intensely ashamed.
But there's one thing about them that joins them together. And it's not really hit upon. It's kind of there to discover, maybe even in a multiple viewing.
Well, just the editing of it. The editing of it makes it there.
Yeah. The heavyset guy discussing his life with Rachel McAdams, mentions that he became an alcoholic, but has been sober for several years. The other guy who is being interviewed by the Mark Ruffalo character, there's a shot right towards the interview, and you see track marks in the guy's arms. So he's still struggling with a substance abuse problem because these assaults, abuses damage these people so hard and put them in such a bad psychological space that they needed, to kind of retreat to drugs or alcohol to try to numb that kind of pain or try to figure out what's going on in their lives.
And that's the ending of the crosscut sequences, right? It's really a wonderful crosscut. The ending of the crosscut, first with McAdams is, he's crying a little bit, and they're walking, they're having a coffee, and he looks up and he goes, "There's a playground right next to a church."
Yeah.
And she goes, "Did you tell anybody about it?" "Who was I going to tell? My priest?" Mm-hmm. And so it's a little bit funny, a little bit like I've kind of grown to it.
Which is a very New England thing. What
was I going to do?
I was born in Massachusetts, seeing as how this is my birthday weekend, so still. I was born in Massachusetts in South Weymouth, which is maybe about 40 minutes south of Boston. So I am like really southy if I wanted to.
You're super southy.
Yeah.
Well, but his sequence ends.
Has family there. And going back, even as a kid, I kind of got the idea that, you didn't talk about a lot of stuff, but sometimes you would have a little crack of a dark sense of humor about certain things.
Well, yeah, but it's perfect. It's perfect. What was I going to tell my priest? Also, just so we're clear, there's a church right next to a playground. And then the other sequence ends with the guy, don't do me any favors. You can use my name if you want to, which is a big part of the interview, that he can't use his name early. And he walks out and, Micheal Keaton, his lawyer, says he's one of the lucky ones. He's still alive. Most of them aren't. Like, most of them lost their way, and Ruffalo kind of, the gravity with which these reporters take this onto themselves. Again, another sequence that I have to talk about. There's a Ruffalo McAdams sequence that is absolutely brilliant on a porch where they're talking, and she basically says, my Nana I haven't been able to go to church with my Nana. And he's, he's like, "I'm sorry." He goes, I've been lapsed. He goes, "I always liked going to church, but I never went back." And she's like, I want to go with my Nana, but I can't get past it. And she's asking questions. And she's like, "Well, maybe you can go, maybe you can go with her." And she goes, Mike, she goes 3 times a week, and it's just like, and then later on in the movie, you watch as Rachel McAdams shows her the paper, and the grandma's just reading the paper, and she's like, "Can you get me a glass of water?" And Rachel McAdams like, it's devastated.
Devastated. What I like about this film is, like I said, it doesn't tell you about the abuse. It tells you the story of how this abuse was discovered and reported on and brought to light, which in a way gives you a better idea of how it was hushed up to begin with, because you're digging through that process to make those discoveries. It's a great story about the process of journalism. I love movies about process, and I love movies about journalism. Something like All the President's Men. There's a 1950s film called While the City Sleeps, which is a great journalism film. Even if it turns out that the serial killer that all this reporters are trying to discover, even if some of that part of the plot turns out to be a little bit problematic, because he's murdering women because he's gay and he feels bad about it or something like that, which is a very bad 50s trope, unfortunately. But the idea of how they show these reporters going about their job really works in that movie. Vincent Price is in it. It's fantastic.
Well, you think of other movies with journalism side, like LA Confidential, or you can look. There's a lot of interesting little pieces you can make out of these movies, but this particular movie,
this one in particular, though,
is amazing.
I was watching it. Okay, like I said earlier, I freelanced entertainment features for the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader, starting in like the mid '90s into the early aughts. Took some time off, picked it back up again a little bit later, and unfortunately, they'd gone through a number of ownership changes, and the last owner decided they didn't really want to pay freelancers. So I was like, And
I'll just start FilmBuffOnline. Go fuck yourself.
Well, I was doing Film Buff at the same time too. That's what's really aggravating. But when I first started out in my mid to late 20s, it was like the mid 90s, late 90s. I would hang out at the newspaper office, once every week or two. I'd go in, I'd pitch my editor, Joe, a couple of articles. I'd talk to one of the people who was editing the weekly TV book, because they would often get screener tapes in of stuff. I'd say, hey, what do you got? And they'd say, oh, we got this and this. And then, I'd take that to Joe, or if he wasn't interested, I'd still take, a tape home and watch it just for myself. I think somewhere in a box I have the screener tape for the Smallville pilot before Annette O'Toole was recast as Ma Kent.
Interesting. That's a valuable thing right now.
I saw the first 2 episodes of South Park like 6 weeks before anybody knew what the hell was about to hit.
What was about to happen?
Yeah, which is crazy. But I would spend some time there too on like election nights. Free pizza. But and I'd see, I talked to some of the other regular reporters, some of whom were there. A couple of them are still there now. God bless them. And I talked to Steve Corbett, who was a big columnist at the time, who was very kind and offered some good advice to me a couple of times.
A radio host of epic proportion, and also somebody that just loved causing local trouble. An amazing shit talker. An incredible shit talker, Steve Corbett.
But all of that, there's like a camaraderie in the newsroom. I watch, writers developing stories and stuff like that. And, just watching that whole thing, it felt almost like being in the Times Leader again, watching this movie, just because I was like,
there's an authentic vibe to it.
Well, they shot it at the Globe,
right.
So...
But it also has an authentic vibe about like the idea a bigger news story hits in the middle of the movie. Of course, 9/11 hits. And so just the idea, that everybody's working together and pitching in and fixing, trying to make things work. And I just think the movie has this wonderful glow about what journalism can do. Like the idea that not everybody would know about what's happening with these people, but if it appears in Spotlight on a Sunday when everybody gets their Boston paper, Boston Globe, American journalism can save people. American journalism, people doing news can actually write and save and move people to change their position, right? And we don't have it anymore. It's going away.
And 9 years later, it's an even more powerful statement. And it's kind of one of these films I wish more people would see, to get back to that, simply because it's an incredible argument for shut up with your I don't like what the news is telling me, so I'm going to call it fake news argument, which is complete bullshit. I'm sorry. If you understood the process, the way you see it here, they get leads, they build a story, an editor says, no, we still need to do this and we need to do that. And we can't attack the bishop. We need to attack the institution and the process that is allowing this abuse to continue. He guides them, and it's an incredible story. This is what journalism is, you dumb fucks. And
the uncovering of bits of information, there's a great sequence in the middle of the movie where they go downstairs into the basement, and there's a Catholic directory where everybody's put for the last 35 years is sitting down in the basement, and they walk in, the lights are low, and the one Marty is reading it, right? And they're like, what is that smell? And they're like, there's a dead rat in the corner. Just stop. The guy that we're tracking down was put on sick leave, and then they get another book. And the next priest that they're looking at was put on sick leave. And then they're taking all the fucking books off the shelf. And then the next sequence you see is an 80s montage of them at home, on the ride to work, eating breakfast, sitting at work late, going through the book with a pen and underlying every one of the priests. And then they start hitting on the statistics to get a number. They're like, we have 13 priests. That's a lot of priests. And then they talk to a guy, and the guy goes, yeah, but when I did it, if you have 1,500 priests, I had a percentage at about 6% of whatever number of priests in your area. And so they're like, well, 6% would be 90 people. And then it's like, and then it expands. And then then they have to find people.
It's the whole process, that researching process.
And it's beautiful and American.
They contact the newspaper's morgue to say, hey, can you pull up clips from this, and this, and to go back over it. And again, I love that research process. I was working on something that I hope to finish off by Wednesday for the site. But I had to go down to the library, and I spent 2 hours there. Which was great, going through a bunch of books, to find certain things. Also in the background, in the back room, they were showing, they do a weekly movie, and they were showing Patton, which was kind of cool. I literally did not know they were showing it. I kind of walked back in there. It's dark. I look up at the screen and just go, oh, Patton. And I just kept walking.
Okay, we got a quick question.
Okay.
I will watch it. I think you guys said the movie is based in Boston. How does Rich shirt tie in? It doesn't. All it is, Rich wore a band that is based in Boston.
And the postmark, Boston, Massachusetts. You can see that.
Rich does these tie-ins. I will also say the Catholic Church has no sharks, except the demon people that abuse children.
Letters to Clea was a 90s alt-rock band from Boston. Kay Hanley, their lead singer, went on to do the vocal work for Josie in Josie and the Pussycats, the live-action movie, which is absolutely genius. And they're, late 90s. This movie takes place in 2000, 2001, 2002. So it's kind of close.
Did you get your 5 minutes? You said you wanted to talk 5 minutes about something. Did you get what you wanted out?
Do I ever?
Well, I'm just asking because I think what I would say is for anybody watching, this is a movie about the bastions of American journalism, and the idea that stories actually require facts. Yes. I think what you were saying, and the idea that I think what's amazing and thriller-like for this movie is the building of the facts. There's a meeting in the midway through where Liev Schreiber's like, yeah, you do that story, you get one bad apple argument from the church. But if you do this, it's about the process. It's about a systemic problem, which is a new phrase that I think this movie started, actually. Systemic, right? Not the movie started, but the story started. Yeah. The idea, we've had systemic. Systemic has become kind of a word that we use to try to explain things away, right? It's systemic. It's a big problem. We can't fix it. But in this case, these American journalists did fix it. And it's just a great story. And then, you know, instead of getting protested at the end, it's exactly how how you want Americans to react to this kind of horror show.
Let me throw something out here that's, again, kind of related to a bunch of my bugaboos about society and journalism.
I still love your bugaboos, though.
Thank you. If in general, society had a better idea, had a better media literacy about how journalism works, like, say, for example, they all had to take a journalism course in high school to understand the process, would this film be as powerful, do you think? Or does it derive part of its power because it's showing something that affects everybody in their day-to-day life? I
have a different take.
I have
a different take. I think this movie is powerful because we're watching the change, and we come from a generation that read papers every day, right? So we're in the middle of this change, this sea change. And all I can see with the sea change to the internet and to media on the internet and TikTok and all these places where people are getting their news from, where the news can be fabricated and changed and modified and doesn't have any of the things that the earmarks that you and I look for with regards when we want our news, right? Mm-hmm. I think for me, the humbling of this movie, the thing about this movie is we're in the midst of this sea change, and the idea of the amount of facts that have to go into something for it to be printed, as opposed for somebody getting on a TikTok and saying, hey, I really don't like that speech that Osama bin Laden gave, right? Or I really like that speech, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The idea that the sheer volume of facts and things that have to go into a story, you and I are from a generation. My dad bought 3 newspapers every day. Every day of my life that he was alive, he bought 3 newspapers a day. He bought the New York Post because he loved the movie ads and the movie reviews. He loved the New York Post because he could see all the big ads in New York. He always loved the ads. He bought, and I was a Mets fan, so I needed something for my sports section. He read the Scranton Times every day, and he read the New York Times every day. And he bought 3 papers a day.
Mm.
We don't even have a paper that publishes locally. We don't we have papers that are around, but they're at best for NEPA folks, Weekender or whatever. We don't have any papers that publish locally for my area. We have an Orlando Sentinel that kind of gets news every once in a while, and we have Daytona Press. But other than that, that's it.
Our state capital here in Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, the Patriot News, which I grew up reading before,
which gets mentioned in the movie, by the way.
Yep. The Patriot News. No, it's a different Patriot News.
You think it's a different Patriot News?
Yeah, it's a different one. It's that's a Boston version. Boston paper. This was the Harrisburg Patriot, and it had a morning edition and an evening edition. We would get the evening edition during the week, and then Saturday and Sunday we would get the morning edition. Well, Sunday was only one edition.
Well, Scranton had 2 newspapers.
Right now, State Capital. Right now, it only the paper only has like a daily online presence, and it publishes 3 times a week now. Publishes a physical paper.
Just so we're clear, Scranton, where I grew up, had 2 papers. We had the Times, which was the Republican paper, and the Tribune, which was the Democratic paper. And you could tell whatever anybody read, whatever party they were. But the thing is, like the thing about this movie, the amazing thing about this movie is this is American journalism at its finest. And when it is its finest, it is transcendent. It is somebody holding a newspaper, reading a story. And you find out at the end that they published 600 stories about this scandal. And so people were, for a year, were glued
to a day.
For a year. So people were glued to this fucking paper. And I think that's for me, the reason this movie succeeds. The cast is amazing. The direction is amazing. The screenplay is tight. The editing is great. It's just an amazing, functional film where you sit back and you just watch things pile up, and it's just by the end.
I was going to say, if you are, intrigued by the reporting and everything, and you want to read more, and you want to see what they actually wrote. Good news.
There's a book
there. The Spotlight team put together a book which was used as one of the sources for the movie. It was called Betrayal, The Crisis in the Catholic Church, and that's
perfect. This is
it's fantastic. It literally starts off after the introduction. The first chapter is on Father Gagan, who is like one of the first priests that comes to the Spotlight team's attention.
Yes, he's patient zero. The legacy of this movie, and the story and everything about it. I mean, movies. Again, we're in a different era now, but movies used to be one of the most noble professions for any movie person to be in a movie. Goes all the way back in time to the front page, and like Superman. Everybody wants to be a reporter, right? Everybody wants in. And the legacy of this movie is, this is probably the last great newspaper movie we're going to get, which is terrifying. We might get a newspaper movie that's about the rise and fall of small town newspapers, but that's going to be a tragedy in its own right.
Yeah, unless it's a period piece, we're not going to get a new newspaper.
Right, a newspaper movie, and like I said, this is a period piece. This this movie takes place, is made 13 years after the fact. And what I would say, the legacy here is the idea of the noble newspaper man, right? That's a legacy that's transcended for films. It's All the President's Men, this movie. All the noble newspaper reporters that are in movies. Like, I was thinking of something where it's not factual. I was thinking of the Christopher Reeve movie. What is? God. I was just thinking of newspaper reporters in general, right? The legacy of this movie is we are looking at one of the last great newspaper films.
Yes.
We would a couple years later we would get The Paper, right, which is Spielberg's take on a very important moment in newspaper history. But again, these are period pieces, Rich. We're not getting these movies now. And so the legacy is that it joins a fine tradition of important movies with great stars starring as important newspaper people in defining historical moments. Right? Mm-hmm. You got Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. You got Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford. You got all of the people in this one. And I think that's one of the more interesting legacies, because it's not necessarily we're going to see movies like this. Because, again, this one was hard to get to screen. Right? But I think the legacy of it is that it becomes one of the next great, best newspaper movies, that it becomes like it's like joining a Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? Like so many important newspaper movies, and this is one of them. And it's and for me, the sad part is it's not nearly as beloved as it should be.
Now, this is not the first newspaper film about a newspaper in Boston, though.
No. Of course.
There's a 1977 comedy called Between the Lines about a fictional alt weekly paper called the Back Bay Main Line. And I'm trying to remember. I'm just pulling this up here. It stars John Hurd, Jeff Goldblum, Bruno Kirby's in this thing, Stephen Collins, Joe Morton, Mary Lou Henner, Michael J. Pollard. It's got a great cast. I saw it a couple of years ago, and I only remembered it after we started the show today. So that's why I'm pulling it up now. I'm not quite prepared on it, but
Well, but you think about
I remember
that
enjoying, and I would say definitely search it out if you're interested.
Right. You think about other things like
1977.
You think about other things like, Almost Famous has a really great newspaper writing kind of tinge to it. Citizen Kane has one. You know what I mean?
Of course.
The Post,
although it's
obviously.
Not for opera review.
Well, no, it's not. It's not. No, it's how newspapers get crushed. But we have comedic ones. We have like the French Dispatch. We have His Girl Friday. Another one that came out recently, of course, that again highlighted the importance of journalism is Zodiac, right? Mm. Like the idea of how they the newspapers were the ones that got the clues about the Zodiac and so Fincher makes that movie and it's almost always about the newspaper reporter. So what I'm saying to you is this is a dying breed of films, Rich. And I think that's tragic. It's super depressing. I don't mean to be depressing. But it's a great place to end. This movie, again, deserves much better than it's received. Because I think more people will see it. The other thing that I would say, the legacy out of this movie is it doesn't transcend the original reporting, but it is the interesting thing how well received this movie was by the Catholic Church. And there is a very strong thing about how many accolades it received from the Catholic Church and also how well it was displayed from Vatican Radio and the idea that it reached the highest echelons of the Vatican. Because you read about it, researching it, a lot of it got good kudos from the Vatican Church, and actually a couple people from the Vatican have even said that the original Spotlight, articles and the movie, kind of coalesce the idea that we really have a problem. Mm-hmm. Right. And that, led to some sort of change. Hopefully, we're still hearing shit every week. You know what I mean? But it's a great legacy for a movie to be able to say that, you were part of a change. Because, newspapers can reach a certain amount of people. Movies tend to reach people all over the place. So maybe somebody saw a Spotlight somewhere where there weren't Spotlight articles. And maybe they were able to achieve something. You know what I mean? The idea that I think this movie is one of those movies that could reach through and maybe save somebody. It's one of those movies. And it's a great place to end and start a vacation. So we are off for the next 2 weeks. Rich ruined that. Joe ruined that early, where he basically came in and absconded all our thoughts.
Thanks, Joe. Spoilers.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for coming in. Yeah, spoilers. But if you like our stuff, and this is something that we wholeheartedly agree and talk about, by all means, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of our stuff is there. As Joe so eloquently pointed out, we have 600 videos with over 1,000 views. So we're growing content-wise every day. But you can subscribe. It takes less than 30 seconds. You click the subscribe button, you'll get all our new stuff. And we do plan to be prolific as we continue. We also have the Indie Escape Book Network Facebook page. I am now putting things up on the Facebook page where you can get cool things like, if you were around last week, I put up these interesting pictures that are super important. Again, another reporter movie coming out called Superman. That's the S. And then we did the Tron Ares, which is one of my favorite franchises. So if you go to those pages or you go to the YouTube channel, you're going to get our content, which is important. Rich, where can people find your stuff?
Oh, boy. All of my writing can be found at FilmBuffOnline.com. I do 2 other podcasts besides this wonderful show. The first I do with my very good friend, Natasha Bogutzki. It's called The Big Picture Podcast.
We miss her tonight. We miss her. I know she has a lot of good things going on.
We dropped our hour-long discussion on Dune Part 2 earlier today. And this time next week, you will be able to hear our after the Oscars hot take show. You can find that show, our the Big Picture podcast, at any place you listen to podcasts, or just go to bigpicturepod.com and that'll take you right to all the shows as well. The other podcast I do is with the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle. That's called Film Scribes. We just dropped last week our Dune and Madam Web episode.
Wow, that's
a swing.
That's a big swing.
And you can find that where you find your podcasts. And you can find me on the socials at FilmBuffRich on Twitter and Blue Sky. And you can find FilmBuffOnline itself on Facebook, where we also have, in addition to links to all the new posts that go up on the site, Facebook exclusive things like
film history. You could do a lot of cool film history. Okay, so with me, I want to talk about basic things first. If you're creative and have a new indie movie trailer or commercial, email to us. We'll play it on an upcoming Indie Escape Network show for free. There's the email, indieescape@gmail.com. I will be here tomorrow night with Loud Nerdy with my other friends, Jerry and Kyle. We'll be discussing all kinds of cool things. We have a new thing called It Came From Jerry's Basement, which should be fun because we're going to do some obscure horror films that may be streaming that you might be able to catch from Jerry's personal collection. We also are going to be doing our Twilight Zone Redux with all the time Enough at Last, which is one of the great Twilight Zone episodes. We're 8 episodes in on this Redux. We will be returning. Actually, you can find me, JW the Movie Guy, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, at JW the Movie Guy. Perfect. And then what I will also say is we are off for the next 2 weeks, but in 2 weeks' time, we will be back on March 25th, and we will be doing this movie called Ghostbusters. It is a movie that in 1984 certainly changed my life because it's something I fell in love with immediately that summer. Hook, line, and sinker. It's celebrating its 40th anniversary. And I will say to you that it's opening weekend also of this little movie called Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So it's going to be a big tie-in that weekend. But we will be back to do it March 25th. And we are taking a good 2 weeks off so we can enjoy the Oscars and be able to give our Oscar thoughts without anybody kind of impeding on it. We don't have to worry about watching a movie or doing a show. So we're taking some time off. Let's see. Last comment from Joe. Have a great spring break. It is spring break. It's a little bit spring breaking. Have a great spring break, guys. We appreciate you. We appreciate you, Joe. We appreciate everybody who watched. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't seen Spotlight, go watch Spotlight. It's one of the great movies of all time. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Rich, have a good 2 weeks off. I'll talk to you about the Oscars, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure we're going to talk
about anybody who doesn't know, next Sunday night, the whole reason for the Oscar Decade Cavalcade is that on ABC, the Oscars will be on the 96th Annual Academy Awards. We're super excited. Jimmy Kimmel's hosting. Should be a big, Rich, I think it's going to be a big Oppenheimer night. I don't know if it's going to do 10. I don't know if it's going to do double digits, but my dad used to dream of nights when there was a sweep. The sweep. And I think he dreamt of it because he saw 2 of them during his lifetime. He saw Ben-Hur and he saw West Side Story. So my dad always loved the sweep. And in recent years, we've gotten away from the sweep because we like giving out Oscars to different movies.
Spread the love.
Spread the love out. But this could be one of those years, Rich.
You may not be wrong.
It could be one of those years. We'll see everybody next 2 weeks from now. Ghostbusters is the movie. You better be there. It's going to be great. I can't wait to talk about it.